The fact of the matter is, in 1999, there was 800,000 employees that worked for the post office. Today, the actual number is 568,000. That's about 250,000 jobs less in 25 years.
I think it is very important, and I keep repeating this often, that we distinguish these two, the skill shortages and the labor shortages. Because while they are similar in some ways, they do also ask for very different policy solutions.
Health is an international human right, same like education. But in South Africa, people are not given health services at the hospitals or at the clinics, even though they know migrants are protected under the Constitution of South Africa.
You have to own it and be proud. No matter what kind of work you do, what kind of background you come from, it's an honor to be a worker and be able and have the ability to work.
One final point I think to recognize around this is that we're educators. And as educators, we should be natural organizers. But we have to take it on and understand it.
Washerwomen washed all the clothes in the South, basically. And many of the clothes around the country, an enormous amount of Black women did that labor. And so they had a monopoly on that job. And so by having that monopoly, working together, they could set the rules about where they did the work.
Hey everybody, Chris Garlock here with this week's edition of the Labor Radio Podcast Weekly. On today's show, the US Postal Service is under the most existential attack in its history. Everything USPS assesses the situation. What's behind Europe's labor shortages? We'll find out on the ETUI podcast. From brand new network member Buwa Basebetsi updates, migrant workers say enough is enough. Machinist Secretary Treasurer Doris Cervantes talks about Latinas in the labor movement on El Cafecito del Dia. AAUP presents talks with Stephanie Hall about how academic freedom is on the line. And in our final segment, the Labor John podcast talks with Blair Kelly, author of Black Folk. Let's get started as usual with Harold's quick rundown of shows you should know.
Thanks, Chris. Social media guy Harold Phillips here again, folks, and I don't have to tell you, there is a lot to talk about right now. Our labor radio show and podcast producers are talking about a lot of things, and not necessarily all the things that you might expect. So this week, we're going to do just a grab bag of different topics in our roundup of shows you should know for the week of March 23rd. First off, let's welcome a new member to the network, Machinists 141 Connections. BC General Employees Union President Paul Finch discusses why 1,200 employees of the American-owned company Life Labs have been conducting rotating strikes to improve their wages, working conditions, and medical services on Radio Labor Canada. The 5 contenders for digital news at the 2025 Writers Guild Awards sit down for a roundtable discussion of their nominated pieces, their writing processes, facing challenges, and finding silver linings in the media industry on the Writers Guild of America East's On Writing podcast. Remember, March is still Women's History Month. Seth talks with Paul Cole and Carol Turbin about labor activist Kate Mullaney and women's role in labor history on Power at Work. And you didn't think you were going to get away this week without some talk about the Trump administration, did you? A disabled Army veteran who lost her job at the VA and a union president fighting to protect workers and their rights join Union Strong to discuss the ways Trump's executive orders are not just shaking up the workplace, but also endangering vital public services that millions of Americans rely on. And Randy talks with Damon Silvers about how the economic policies of President Trump and Elon Musk hurt working and middle-class Americans. And teachers Greg Cruey and Ternisha Burrows share what their communities in Minnesota and West Virginia are experiencing on Union Talk. And you know where you can find labor radio shows and podcasts talking about all sorts of topics, don't you? Just head over to laborradionetwork.org. And if you want to find out what our producers are talking about this month, or this week, or today, be sure to follow us on social media at Labor Radio Net on Blue Sky and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. For now, back to you, Chris. I'm going to tune in and hear what some of the people who are part of the network are talking about this weekend.
Hey, thanks, Harold. Here's everything USPS.
All I hear is talking, I don't sweat that. If they don't trust me either, I respect that. If she be down the ride, oh, I bet that. Ooh.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is J.H. How you doing, Postal family? Is everybody good? Is everybody cool? Everybody clean? Are you crisp? Are you feeling irie today? Let's talk. Fight like hell. Fight like hell. So what we're actually going to talk about a new bill that was introduced that might be helpful to counteract the other two bills that were proposed. Let's get one thing straight. If you think the USPS bills aren't a threat, you're either uninformed or ignorant in history. I've heard it all before. It's fear-mongering. The USPS and the Constitution, they can't touch it. These bills will never pass. But here's the hard truth. Those who scream fear-mongering are often the ones that don't know the facts or the history. I'm gonna break it down for you just because this isn't about politics. It's about survival of an American institution. Number one, someone made a comment about 200,000. Where is that even coming from? Well, let's educate you, shall we? The fact of the matter is, in 1999, which was about 25 years ago, there was 800,000 employees that worked for the post office. Today, the actual number is 568,000. That's about 250,000 jobs less in 25 years. You can go and do the research yourself. So when I say, hey, look at this individual that's speaking about it. Again, the video wasn't a Democrat, it was a Republican. I put it out there for you to listen to. 250,000 jobs less in 25 years. So when the individual said it could be up to 200,000 jobs lost, there's the facts for you. There it is. Good middle-class jobs that support families like yours and communities. It's not a statistic, it's a warning sign. The USPS is systematically weakened, and these new bills are designed to finish the job. Bills like the S1006 and others targeting union dues and payroll deductions aren't just a political theater. They're part of a larger effort to either privatize the USPS or make it a for-profit organization. Service cuts, etc. The USPS workforce has cut over 30%. We dropping facts for those ones that say, no, it can't happen. Facts. Look it up for yourself. You done got the old man angry because your ignorance. It can never happen. It's happened. It's in the Constitution. They can't touch it. We've heard this one before. But the Constitution gives the Congress the power to regulate the Postal Service, and Congress has been doing that with the disastrous results. The Postal Accountability Enhancement Act in 2006, the bill that forced the USPS to pre-fund retiree health benefits in 75 years in advance, is the one that we're dealing with right now that's crippling our finances. It passed, and the big reason why the USPS is in trouble. So the Constitution can't save the post office if bad legislation is put forward. Will the post office exist if we lose the unions? Yes. Will it be split up into a bunch of little fucking things? Probably. What'll be happening to us? Shit if I know. Everybody, oh, the people up top. Come on, man. Let's think about this as a union, unified amongst all. I don't even know what else to say. This is JH. I'm out.
Amidst all the current debates in Europe about competitiveness, productivity, migration, and economic transitions, both green and digital, you're bound to have come across the ongoing issue of labour shortages in recent times, particularly since the pandemic. Significant numbers of employers not being able to find workers to fill vacancies is, of course, considered a major policy issue, intrinsically tied to all of the subjects that I've just mentioned. But what are the major factors driving these shortages? Where do we see them the most? And what kinds of solutions would be the most effective? Today's guest is ETUI senior researcher Wouter Zwijsen, an expert on labour market dynamics. Having studied this issue in depth and from multiple angles, he certainly has no shortage, so to speak, of insights into the topic. I'm your host, Bethany Staunton, and you're listening to ETUI Podcast, Voices on the World of Work. Wouter, welcome to the ETUI Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me on the podcast. I'm really happy to join you for this.
So let's start very broad. What's going on with labour shortages in Europe right now?
That is a really good question because, as you know, ever since the pandemic, this has been a very important topic in terms of policy agenda, in terms of the labour market, and a lot of attention has gone to ways to address the different aspects of labour shortages. What we can see from the data is that generally from 2012, 2013 or something, labour shortages have been starting to increase steadily across Europe. Then at the pandemic, obviously there was a big hit, and for a very short while there was no real demand for labour. But then from about the second, third quarter of 2020, this started to pick up at a far faster rate. And it peaked somewhere 2022, 2023. At the moment, we're seeing a small decline overall, but we're still at a level above 2019 and still at a very high level of labour shortages. The thing that is important to note here as well is that we see this in the aggregate, but the main thing is that it's really quite present across most of the EU member states. So there's variations. It's worse in the Netherlands, Austria, Belgium, but we see this growth in shortages in almost all countries. And we also see it in many of the different sectors we're looking at in Europe. So for instance, what was a bit odd about these increases in labour shortages is that they started going up very fast in sectors we don't often think of as extremely highly skilled or with very specific profiles, such as accommodation, hotel services, food and beverage services, got very big increases in shortages. And so did the sectors that we do traditionally think of as very difficult to find people, such as IT, specific healthcare professionals. And this really just shows the two aspects of it. On the one hand, there's a big shortage in specific skills, driven by the digital and green transitions, by really strong demand for specific IT professionals, specific healthcare, very specific construction workers. On the other hand, there's a big shortage of just bodies and labor in general. And so I think it is very important, and I keep repeating this often, that we distinguish these two, the skill shortages and the labor shortages. Because while they are similar in some ways, they do also ask for very different policy solutions and ways to address this. Thank you so much for having me and for letting me ramble a little bit on your questions, but I find this a very important topic, and I'm really happy to have the opportunity to speak to you on this.
Hello and welcome to Buwa Basebetsi weekly update. Here, we keep you posted with the developing news and organizing efforts by the Casual Workers Advice Office and Semunya Workers Forum. This week, we look at the treatment of migrants in South Africa and what is being done to organize them. Members of Semunya Workers Forum in full voice as they welcome migrant workers in a meeting organized by the Casual Workers Advice Office earlier this month. This urgent meeting was prompted by the spate of unfair dismissals and suspensions of migrant workers since the second half of 2024. It has highlighted how migrants are being treated with disdain by the employers in this country. John Apolis of Casual Workers Advice Office spoke to Buwa Basebetsi, explaining the purpose of this meeting.
First of all, the migrant workers have shown that they are willing to be organized because there is a perception out there that migrant workers are not willing to be organized, that they are just here to accept very, very low wages. So they are coming to the office, they want to be organized, they want to fight for their rights. So as KAU, we and Senior Workers Forum, we are assisting them in organizing and demanding their rights. So we are busy challenging the employers. We are referring cases to the CCMA to demand that these workers be paid the national minimum wage, but also challenging the fact that they have been chased away from work, because we feel that is an unfair dismissal, and therefore we are challenging it.
This, to most South Africans, is just news. But to a migrant worker, it is a lived experience. What would you do if your employer tells you you cannot earn a certain amount because you are not a South African? This is exactly what happened to Loveness Bonongwe, a Malawian national employed by ZGG Farm since 2020. ZGG is a vegetable farm west of Johannesburg, and it is never far from controversy.
In terms of working, I don't see the real difference. We're all working same work. Yeah, if it is a foreigner or South African, we work fairly. Yeah, but when it comes to payment, it's when we see some changes. Say no, you can't get this kind of money because you are foreigner. You see, yeah.
And what is the reason for that?
The main reason that I hear, they say because we are foreigners, especially Malawians, say no, you can get much money, same money like South Africans. For them, they get much money. For us, they say no, you are foreigners, don't have papers.
This poor treatment of migrants is not only confined to workplaces, but to all facets of their lives. Annie Michaels, a freelance journalist and activist based in Johannesburg, lives amongst them, and she says that they struggle to get access even to healthcare facilities.
Health is an international human right, same like education. But in South Africa, people are not given health services at the hospitals or at the clinics, even though they know migrants are protected. Under the Constitution of South Africa, migrants are protected, so they do have rights to go to clinics. They do actually have right for health services. Migrants are being blamed for the weak services. Migrants are constantly being blamed for depleting the medical resources.
Migrants in South Africa face constant challenges, often fueled by the perception that they are responsible for everything that's wrong in this country, from unemployment, draining of resources, through to crime. But it is very clear that most of the abuse directed at migrants is because they are vulnerable, and in most cases, they come in the country not knowing their rights. Buwa Basebetsi is produced by the Casual Workers Advice Office in Germiston.
Bienvenidos al Cafecito del Día.
Bienvenidos, soy Carmen Rodríguez. En el mes de la mujer y en este nuevo episodio del Cafecito del Día hosted by Ariana Pulido, one of LACLA's interns, we have a very special conversation with a distinguished leader in the labor movement, Dora Cervantes, Secretary Treasury of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAM. Dora shares her inspiring journey in the labor movement, from her early days to becoming one of the most influential women's leaders fighting for workers' rights.
Good afternoon, Dora. Thank you for being with us here at El Cafecito del Día.
Thank you for having me.
Excited to have you here. So can you tell me a little bit about your journey into the labor movement, and how did you first become involved with IAM, and what drew you to this work?
I come up from a union household, so my grandparents and my father were all union members. They worked on the railroad side. Eran ferrocarrileros. And so I knew what it was, the importance of belonging to a union and the benefits it provided. So in 1989, I went to go work for Southwest Airlines, which they had the IAM contract in place. And being that contracts represent the workers, I got involved in the benefits, the wages, and just to see the policy and be aware of what I was entitled to or what was negotiated on my behalf.
What exactly drew you to IAM?
Well, I became a union member when I first got hired because I know the importance of belonging to a union. And what drew me there is that we were in contract negotiations, and I wanted to know or be aware of what's being negotiated on my behalf because contracts impact the livelihood and just the knowledge of what was being negotiated on my behalf.
And now talking about women in union and in the workforce, in your opinion, what does it mean to be a trabajadora? And how does that identity shape your daily work and your values?
To be a trabajadora is to have ownership, to have value. Como una trabajadora, tú también das el 100% en el trabajo. You give 100%. You're equal to the other workers. Makes me proud to be a woman and to be a worker, to stand up and to be recognized. And we have to continue down that path. You have to own it and be proud, no matter what kind of work you do, what kind of background you come from. It's an honor to be a worker and be able and have the ability to work.
There's many young women who might feel uncertain about pursuing careers in labor or leadership roles in unions. What do you think is most important for them to understand about being a trabajadora in these male-dominated fields?
To stand up. You can't be heard if you don't stand up, if you don't open your mouth and you don't say something. Your presence alone should speak and radiate who you are as a woman and as a worker. And if we stop fighting, there's nobody that's going to fight for us. And we've come too far to go back and lose what we've worked for. So to all the young women that are out there, value yourself, value your work, value your person, and value your rights, and stand up. Stand up and fight for those rights. Stand up and fight for a woman. And yes, it is a male-dominant world, and we have a lot of barriers, and you will fall, but you will pick yourself right back up.
Well, Dora, thank you so much for being with us here at El Cafecito del Día. It was a pleasure having you, and we can't wait to see you around and see what you continue to do in the labor movement.
Well, thank you. Y seguimos adelante como mujeres y como luchadoras. Gracias.
We must stand together in solidarity to protect our rights, our voices, and the generations of progress we have fought for in the workplace. We must continue to break barriers, uplift each other, and demand the respect and justice all workers deserve regardless of origin, immigration status, or race.
Under the Trump administration, the attacks on higher education have come fast and furious. From the slashing of NIH research funding, to the weaponization of federal grants, to the expulsion and attempts to deport student protesters, to the executive order calling for the closure of the Department of Education, Trump and the right wing have launched an all-out attack on higher ed. And in this moment, college and university administrators face a choice. They can fight back or they can obey. Some, like the administrators at Columbia University, have chosen to obey. Obedience and capitulation is the subject of AAUP Presents today. In this episode, we'll talk to Henry Reichman, one of the authors of AAUP's statement against anticipatory obedience, released earlier this year. The statement says, in the face of the barrage of attacks, it is the higher education community's responsibility not to surrender to such attacks, and not to surrender in anticipation of them. Instead, we must vigorously and loudly oppose them. Reichman, who we all call Hank, is a professor emeritus of history at California State University East Bay, a former AAUP vice president, a former chair of Committee A, and he's currently a member of Committee T.
Well, on one level, of course, it sometimes appears, reading the news, that everything's under attack. But with respect to higher education in particular, I talk about two things. First, the attacks on DEI. I think it's very clear that the attacks we are seeing now coming from the Trump administration and from sympathetic state governments and the MAGA movement in general have little to do with the particulars of DEI programs that people may or may not find controversial. Indeed, the attacks are really on the underlying principles, on the whole principle of should higher education strive to become diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And clearly, the attacks are aimed at saying no to that. In that regard, there are attacks not only on DEI programs, but on curriculum, on faculty, on students who are themselves diverse or who seek equitable treatment, etc. So that's the second thing I'm really concerned about with respect to higher education is the attack on science and research. The freezing of funding for scientific research in the NIH, the layoffs of personnel at the CDC and elsewhere, and in particular, the effort by the administration, currently suspended by the courts, but still very much hanging over us, to drastically reduce the ability of institutions to recoup indirect costs, really threaten the whole research mission. In particular, of course, of research institutions, but even at predominantly teaching institutions like the one where I taught for 25 years, the Cal State system. Two main mechanisms that faculty have to enforce our principles around academic freedom, around faculty rights in general, around diversity, equity, and inclusion for that matter. And of course, those are the two mechanisms. And while unionization may not be available to all faculty members, shared governance is, but even where both are available, the two can work hand in hand. But both a faculty senate and a collective bargaining agreement are only as strong as the faculty who work to implement them. I think the key thing in all of this is for faculty, for more faculty, to involve themselves. And one final point I think to recognize around this is that we're educators. And as educators, we should be natural organizers. But we have to take it on and understand it. And that's what I think is going to be the key. And hopefully, these assaults will wake people up, and instead of, as our opponents hope, demoralizing us, give us a bit more of a backbone.
Thanks to Hank for appearing on AAUP Presents.
Hello, and welcome to the Labor Jawn podcast, where we wait for the inevitable sun death of the planet. In the meantime, we're going to talk about the working class history of Philadelphia and the surrounding world. My name is Young Sam James. I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Gabe Christie, and I'm actively trying to avoid wet bulbs. And we are joined tonight by Dr. Blair L.M. Kelly.
I've written a book. It's called Black Folk, The Roots of the Black Working Class. And I use my family stories to talk about the meaning of working life for Black people, beginning in enslavement and really running through the 20th century with some nods to the current moment of the sort of post-COVID labor market for African Americans. And I'm really excited about the book. I've been working on it for a few years and looking forward to talking to you about it.
One thing that I've been struck by from delving into especially immigrant labor history is how much the kind of secondary and tertiary communal organizations feed into the eventual labor organizing. Like you'll have either fraternal organizations or mutual aid societies or religious institutions or anything like that that serve as kind of an outside nexus for organizing. And I was wondering if you could illuminate anything on that within the Black experience, and especially with the washerwomen and their, because I was really struck by their ability to organize so quickly after abolition and going from enslavement all the way into basically having a union monopoly in, was it Jackson?
Yes, in Jackson, Mississippi. The washerwomen there organized a set of demands in 1865, which is just so incredible to me that, as soon as the war is over, they're prepared. Mm-hmm. It's a lesson about the degree to which, even in enslavement, the enslaved understood the role of their labor, and they understood the world around them. They weren't confused. They didn't need someone to come and raise their consciousness about what was going on. They had a keen understanding. And so for me, it's a reminder that working people get it. Sometimes they need resources. Sometimes they need, money and time and space to pull together what they know, but they understand. And Black workers are no exception to that policy. And, washerwomen, for your listeners, because I'm pretty sure we all just have washing machines at this point for the most part, or laundromats. But washerwomen washed all the clothes in the South, basically. And many of the clothes around the country, an enormous amount of Black women did that labor because it was stigmatized for white women to do that in the South publicly, to sort of have clotheslines and things like that. So if they had any money, they would send their laundry out with washerwomen. And that connection was built in slavery and continued in freedom. And so they had a monopoly on that job. There really was very little competition. And so by having that monopoly, working together, they could set the rules about where they did the work. So they didn't want to work in white households. They didn't want to work under white supervision. It was dangerous oftentimes for Black women domestics who would suffer from sexual violence from employers. And so they would do that work at home. They would be able to watch their children. They would be able to tend to their own households, and they would do it on their own schedule, on their own calendar. And they would take holidays and take days off when they felt like it, around Christmas, around Easter. They would not be available. And so the power of their collectivity really set the labor market in a profound way.
All right. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. And do you have anything you'd like to close with, or?
No, I just,
plug your stuff.
I love.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you're interested in the South, come follow me. I'm at the Center for the Study of the American South. I'm the first Black woman to run it in its 30-year history. And I, by Black folk, read that.
Yes.
I like it.
Or get out of the library or whatever.
And that's a wrap for this week's edition of the Labor Radio Podcast Weekly, our roundup of some of the programs aired over the last week on more than 200, that's right, 200 labor radio and podcast shows. They are all part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, shows that focus on working people's issues and concerns. We've got links to all the network shows, laborradionetwork.org. You can find them. Use the hashtag LaborRadioPod on X, Facebook, and Instagram. Don't forget, let us know what you think of the show. Drop us a note, info@laborradionetwork.org. You can be part of the network. You don't even need a microphone. Labor Radio Podcast Network t-shirts are available. They're union made. You'll find them in all sizes and 2 colors at laborradionetwork.org. This podcast is recorded under a SAG-AFTRA collective bargaining agreement. The Labor Radio Podcast Weekly, edited this week by Captain Swing. I produce the show, and our social media guru always and forever is Mr. Harold Phillips. For the Labor Radio Podcast Weekly, this has been Chris Garlock. Stay active and stay tuned to your local Labor Radio Podcast show. We will see you next week.